You're listening to The Uncooked Rice Show, a podcast where young Asian Americans talk about being young, Asian, and North American. I'm your host, Jesse Xie, an 18-year-old Chinese kid who's not a doctor, not a lawyer, and definitely not an engineer, talking to other young Asian Americans who would probably make my parents proud. Together, let's explore their successes, their struggles, and ultimately, their journey leaving the bamboo forest. Hey, welcome back to The Uncooked Rice Show. This is episode 5, and today I'm with Vivian Tan. She's currently a student at Palmer Secondary, and she's the founder of Youth of BC and a speaker for numerous occasions at a few TEDx events. Vivian, welcome to the show.
Alrighty, sounds good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So let's talk a bit about what you've been up to over the summer.
Alrighty, sounds great. So far I've been recently got on to the Project Snapshot Chain as a mentorship coordinator. So I've kind of been in charge of a mentorship program, which I kind of wanted to do because I wanted to help youth basically be prepared for life after high school, because I know it can be really scary about post-secondary and basically the transition because it's such a steep learning curve. And I've also gathered the courage to basically recruit a volunteer team for my own nonprofit.
Right.
Up until recently, I only just had myself and kind of a friend that I recently recruited for the nonprofit. So I'm looking to transition it from a social media platform to a incorporated nonprofit.
Right.
The process is pretty long and difficult, but I think I got the hang of it.
That's good.
And other than that, it's more so just developing my personal brand and basically getting more active on LinkedIn, connecting with other people, as well as basically doing a little bit more public speaking.
That's good. It seems like you've been pretty productive over the summer.
Oh my gosh, yes.
A lot of people can't relate, I think. Most people are just taking their time to relax, right? So, I mean, what's motivating you to be so productive?
I would say personally, I know that by volunteering, I know that I can push myself to do better and basically develop my own skills. Like some skills I can't basically develop in school, for example, like public speaking or leadership. And also that volunteering and just giving back to the community, I would say personally I find it self-satisfying in the sense that it's also one of my passions.
Right.
I discovered it back when I was in grade 8. I was kind of told to discover like a lot of stuff, and I tried to sign up for a bunch of clubs to volunteer as a member. And I said to myself, hey, it's actually pretty fun to just give back. And when someone says thank you because they're grateful for what you did, it kind of just feels really great. So I decided to do more and more, and eventually I stepped up and tried to do even more leadership roles, and that's also kind of where I'm going at right now still.
Right. And you're currently heading into grade 10, right?
That was actually grade 11.
Grade 11, right, my bad.
No worries.
So you're about to basically prepare your life for university, right?
Yeah, I'm not ready, but you know what? Let's see where life takes me.
Is anyone ready, honestly? I think people in university don't even feel ready for university, so it's a tough process. But you talked a little bit about why you being so motivated over the summer, but what inspired you to be a leader? Especially a leader in your community.
Yeah, I would say that's a pretty good question. I wanted to be a leader to basically be a role model for others and to also kind of encourage and empower students to be the same too. I would say like leading something in general can be really scary because you have like high expectations placed on you. But it's actually because people look up to you and people admire and respect you. But I would say not only that, but you also get to learn skills, especially people skills. So because a lot of times you do have to work with people, and leadership is a very important soft skill that can be applied in many different areas.
Right.
And usually for jobs, like we interact with people, and a lot of times it does require leadership to kind of interact with people and be cohesive within a team. And I would say lastly for leadership is that you can also take in charge of yourself. Like you don't need to be in a very big leadership position to be a leader.
Right.
Like you could just be a leader for yourself by taking control of your life and basically living the life that you want, essentially.
So with all that being said, what is your definition of leadership, do you think?
Oh my goodness,
that's
a tough question. I would say there's no one size fits all.
Right.
And there's always a special way that you define leadership. I define leadership as someone that you look up to and someone that definitely is not only a leader but also kind of mentors you, because ultimately their goal is to help you succeed,
right,
and maybe even surpass them in a sense.
Now that you mentioned that, who does Vivian Tan look up to for inspiration?
I would say a lot of people, But you're not giving me a lot of choices. But I would say one person. One person would definitely be my uncle.
Your uncle, okay.
Yeah, for sure. He's currently in Hong Kong, but he's very wise in the sense that he knows a lot about self-improvement and basically having like the right mindset for leadership. And he basically taught me a lot by giving me resources, for example, like any YouTube channels to follow. He's like, hey, follow this YouTube channel. It's pretty great for self-motivation. And I would say that he also kind of taught me a lot of life lessons. Basically, when I was like at my very down moments, like he was there to comfort me and basically say like, hey, it's okay to be like this, but you also got to get back up on your feet and move forward because you have a lot in your life to live up to.
So you've mentioned a bit about sort of how you've grown as a leader and how you've been inspired to be a leader, but what sort of challenges have you faced so far? Because I can't imagine you haven't faced any struggles, right?
Mm-hmm. I would say in life you always will face like a really big struggle. One of them was actually kind of just a lot of people not relating to kind of like my drive for being involved with the community. Like a lot of people just kind of were very chill in school and they didn't volunteer as much. So I kind of didn't click with people,
right?
Which I did. Sometimes I felt lonely that there were not a lot of people. But I would say that within your volunteer network, there's always other people that you can reach out to. Like sometimes the best friends that you don't have doesn't necessarily have to be within your school. They can even be outside of school, and by just keeping in touch with them, like whether it's like a Zoom call or even just texting them once in a while to check up with them, I would say like you can definitely build like a really great relationship over time. I would say another challenge is that it's okay to make mistakes. I used to be like a perfectionist. Like I don't like making mistakes. Whenever there's a tiny mistake, I always beat myself up over it, like very hard. And that also kind of caused me to have a very low self-esteem.
Right.
I didn't feel confident in myself as ability as a leader. But how I overcame that was that I noticed that why am I beating up? I just became self-aware about why am I beating myself up over one little mistake? It's not because it's not going to matter like 5 or 10 years from now. But in the sense that also when you make a mistake, like there's always a chance to improve for sure. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
I think being able to make mistakes and being able to learn from them is the most important process of leadership, and especially starting up like any project, right? Because if you go through life, for me personally, if you go through life making no mistakes, being all perfect, essentially you're not going to be able to learn anything, right? You may think that you're the perfect person because your track record has shown that, right? But once you hit a bump in the road, you might not know what to do, right? So I think being able to admit and being able to realize and understand how to fix your mistakes is a really good process.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I believe that by having mistakes and learning from them, it also kind of builds that grit. It makes you stronger. And I would say like making a mistake, it also causes you to have a big gap in learning and maturity as well.
Right. That's totally true. So let's talk about your nonprofit. So you've talked a bit about this early on, but you founded Youth of BC, right? Which started off, I guess, from what I understand, as a Facebook group?
I would say it's not only a Facebook group, but also kind of an Instagram page.
Right.
So I just started it because I wasn't prepared for life after high school. And I quickly noticed that a lot of people within my community also felt the same thing too. They felt lost, they felt unprepared. And I know that even school, even though they tried to help, there's still something missing. So there was a gap. And I was thinking, okay, maybe how can I help make people's lives better? Like how can I get them prepared for life after high school? And so I decided to start Youth of BC, which kind of was started off a social media platform to just help youth for life after high school by providing other opportunities that were available, basically giving more accessibility so people can know about it, as well as one-on-one advice. So they're free to reach out to me for advice for life after high school, for example, like time management and such. And eventually, it became bigger and bigger. So my inbox had so many messages that I couldn't keep up with it. So I decided to say, hey, maybe I could start doing more impact since a lot of people seem to like it. So maybe I could just take a little break and then try to gather a team and actually launch it as a nonprofit instead of a social media platform, in which there was a prolonged process. It's actually definitely not the traditional way of just starting off an organization.
Right.
I kind of did have a fear of just leading a team and leading a nonprofit, definitely because of expectations placed. But I would say that I would say that the other team members are also kind of nervous too.
Right.
But we're here for each other. So I said that, okay, as long as we're here for each other, I know that people understand and it'll be okay to like make a mistake or sometimes not know where to go, because there's always someone else that could pitch an idea or like basically help out with it.
And you recently just finished hiring your team, right?
Yes,
So,
and it's so hard to make a decision. I would say making a decision between candidates, it's very hard, especially if they're really good.
Especially they're tough, right? It's a tough decision, because on one side you don't want to let go of the talent, like the potential talent and potential help that they can give, but on the other hand you can't really hire everyone that you see, right? So I guess my question to you first is sort of how did you learn about what to do for the hiring process? Like, what did you have anyone teach you how to make an application list and how to actually go out and market it, or?
Some part of it was actually from experience as a person who was trying to get hired for a volunteering experience. So I kind of thought through, okay, there may be an application process, like kind of looking for the questions, like what do they show an applicant? I will also basically list down who do I want the applicant and kind of like the values that they should have. And as well as for the applications, I kind of basically assess and gauged like how clear was the answers, like how like did the person put time in it and such. And as for interviews, I kind of looked for their personality as well as kind of the experience that they had, and even the answers. For example, situational and behavior answers, especially because I can tell a lot about a person. Like if you kind of dig in and cause them to basically dive deeper into like how their thinking process is, and then they can also show certain qualities.
Yeah.
For example, one question I asked was kind of walking through the process of making an event. Like, does that show like critical thinking? Does that show organization and such? So that was pretty much the gist of it.
So you've basically used your own experience as a person who applied for an application, and then you basically took what was good, what you thought was pretty good, and created basically your own process.
Yes. And I would say another part would be also getting other people to help. For example, other people from other nonprofits I know.
Right.
I definitely reached out to one person who was passionate about human resources. So I asked them, okay, what can I do to improve the process? And not only that, but also onboarding and retention too. Because I would say those are also kind of the basic founding steps of having a long-term team.
Right. And so you mentioned that having to pick between two like really good candidates who are pretty equal was tough, right? So what other challenges did you have to face?
Oh my goodness. I would say decision making is one of them, especially between two people.
Right.
So I definitely have to look for many aspects. For example, I look over the pros and cons, I would say, and also kind of like what will happen. So I kind of build scenarios in the future, and those were some of the ways that I tried to pick candidates. And I would say another struggle is kind of the mindset of being a founder of an organization. Is basically like being a leader, as well as kind of spearheading. So basically setting the foundation and setting the benchmark of how you want the team to live up to, and basically what will be the vision. So what will happen like 5 or 10 years from now, like basically looking long term.
Looking at the big picture, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay, I have to ask, how old is most of your team? Is it like roughly your age, younger, maybe some university, or?
I would say it's definitely high school students.
Right.
And I was actually considering moving it to university or post-secondary students.
Right.
Just so that there would be a wider age range, and as well as I'm expanding it beyond BC Canada. So far I just put BC Canada just so I can get more opportunities, because that's kind of like within my expertise.
And also the name is Youth of BC.
Oh my goodness, yeah. But I was thinking of changing the name because I want to expand, so to make it even more accessible to the youth.
Definitely.
And yeah, so I did go changing the name. That was something on my wish list actually.
But I think it's always good to start out in your area of expertise first and then branch out when you're ready, right? I just hit my microphone.
Oh.
Hope that doesn't come out bad in the production.
Right.
So So the reason why I asked that is I want to ask you: is there a weird sort of barrier that you have to overcome because you are roughly the same age as your other team members, and because you're the founder, because you're technically the leader of this team? Do you find that there's a weird disconnect or a weird sort of relationship that you have to get past?
That's a really good question. I would say it definitely depends on the person, but for me, not really. Although I still feel a little bit because I know that some of the members are actually older than me, so it's kind of weird how it plays out. But I do know that even though they're older, like they still have a lot of ideas to contribute.
Right.
They still have a lot of they have a great personality, and I know that they can definitely contribute and bring value to the organization.
That's fair. So let's pivot away a bit and into the bigger picture of this podcast episode. So why do you think it's important for students and especially young people to get involved in leadership opportunities and maybe just even get involved in their community?
Good question. I would say first of all, you can definitely build skills that you can't really be taught in school. One of them is definitely can be public speaking. I know that there isn't a public speaking class in school. I wish there was, but sadly there isn't. And another one definitely for sure is organization and time management.
Right.
Because not only do you have like a volunteer opportunity to attend to, but you also have your academics or maybe even sports or stuff within the school. And you definitely learn like how to prioritize tasks. For example, is it urgent or do I need to do it today? Is it important? And I would say not only that, but it also kind of prepares you for teamwork. Because a lot of sense for getting involved in community, a lot of stuff deals with teams, it deals with people. And when you learn those people skills, you also learn and grow your EQ. So basically your emotional intelligence.
Right.
Basically dealing with situations.
Yeah. And okay, it's good that you brought up public speaking. So you've spoken at 3 TEDx events?
Yes, and also a couple more. So for example, I spoke at panels, and
Right.
also I would be speaking at a couple youth summits. So that's pretty exciting, I would say.
And you mentioned this before the interview, that basically the way, like, do you want to explain how you basically got into speaking at your first TEDx event?
Oh my goodness. I would say it's definitely not traditional. A lot of people think like, oh, did you get invited? Did you get through a formal application process?
Or did you like spend all this time thinking about what kind of topic you want to talk about?
Yes. Yeah. So I was scrolling through Facebook one day, and then I saw the application, and I was saying, oh, it's pretty interesting. It's the first time I've ever seen like a TEDx speaker application on Facebook. So, and it was the application deadline was actually the day that I saw the Facebook post. So I was thinking, should I do it or should I not? And I was thinking, you know what? You only live once, so why not try it? The worst thing that people say is that it's a no thank you. And surprisingly, I got in. So I would say it was pretty unbelievable because there not only that, but there also was an interview process, which I was also extremely nervous because there are a lot of competent people. I saw one person who was like dressed up formally, and he had like this really cool rocket. So I was thinking, oh, whoa, okay, wow.
Really underprepared for this.
But I would say, if you do want to get into public speaking, especially TEDx, definitely like have the idea, so know your why. Like, why do you want to speak at a TEDx stage, and definitely like why do you want to speak about this topic? Because ultimately, you don't have to be like an expert public speaker. Before my first TEDx talk, I used to kind of sound like Siri within school presentations. That wasn't the best.
Yeah.
But I would say definitely be you, be authentic, and as a speaker, even if you get rejected from the application, there's always a next time for a speaker, and you can also learn and ask for feedback, so you can definitely learn and grow as a speaker.
Yeah, and it, like you said earlier, it's the worst thing they can say is, unfortunately, we're looking to take other applicants and yours wasn't accepted, right? So the worst thing they can say is no, thank you, right? So that's not it's not a bad idea to sort of take a risk and get involved, right? And on the topic of public speaking, because public speaking is, people think of it as like, oh, public speaking is speaking in front of a stage of a crowd of people, right? Like you're being this inspirational, motivational speaker, but you use public speaking skills mostly in your everyday life, right? When you're making presentations at school, for example, when you're giving a job, when you're getting into a job interview, that sort of thing. So what would be your advice to help, kids or introverts who, are pretty shy and new to the process?
Great question. I would say, first of all, you definitely have to believe in yourself.
Right.
Because you're not confident in yourself as a speaker, you're more likely to make a mistake and beat yourself up over it. And the audience can actually sense it, like if you're nervous or if you're shy. And it kind of gives an off-putting, which makes you even feel worse. So it's kind of like a snowball effect. And the second one is definitely sound human. So basically sound like you're talking to friends. Because if you think of speaking formally, you actually sound different and kind of a little bit robotic in a sense.
Yeah.
And you kind of disconnect yourself from the audience. So I would say by connecting with the audience, you feel more welcomed in a sense. Another one would be to definitely make sure that it's okay to make a mistake. The audience actually does not know your script.
Right.
So if you forget your lines, I actually forgot my lines once. And that, I would say, was pretty nerve-wracking, but I quickly realized that the audience doesn't know what's happening, so I just carried on without a problem. And I would say, another tip of advice is that don't stare into someone's eyes. I would say in general, when you stare in someone's eyes, it can feel a little bit off-putting, and definitely where there's a lot of eyes on you, it can also make you feel nervous. But I would say, first of all, if you're on a professional stage, a lot of times it's just pitch black.
Yeah.
So you can think of it as a pitch black wall that you're just presenting to. But if it's not pitch black wall, that's still okay. You could stare at the wall or not at the person's eyes. You could look at their foreheads, which is definitely more comforting. And we kind of don't feel like the stares at you.
Yeah, I was a theater student, and we had, because acting on stage is basically public speaking, right? But in a formal, weird formal setting. And so a lot of basically the lessons that we were taught was like, definitely don't stare into somebody's eyes for way too long. 3 seconds is usually the maximum you should try to do it. Otherwise, it's very awkward, right? And I think definitely thinking of it as like a conversation rather than a sort of lecture, usually easier for, especially with people starting out, because most of the time you don't want to feel, if you're thinking that it's a lecture, right, or something important or formal, and you make a mistake, you tend to sort of process that as, oh no, I made a mistake, this thing's all going to go badly, and it just keeps going worse into a vicious cycle, right? And I would also agree with you saying that that I think the audience definitely doesn't know when you make a mistake, and so the best thing you can do if you do make one is to just act confident and pretend it was all part of the plan, right? So I think you being your age, being able to learn all these lessons through this experience is really inspiring, right? And so would you recommend that people just keep practicing public speaking, go doing events, taking the time to actually search for these things, like these practice events, to actually improve their public speaking?
Yeah, I would definitely recommend just practicing first by yourself.
Right.
Even though your voice can sound really weird, I would definitely recommend recording yourself and then hearing back, and as well as getting your family and friends and basically presenting to them and say like, hey, what are your opinions on this? Is it okay? And I would definitely recommend watching other TEDx talks. And definitely there's a lot of great TEDx speakers out there. And if you do want to get into TEDx, or you do want to like become a public speaker, I would say first of all, you could go on the TED.com website and you go search for local TEDx events. And you look at their websites and see your speaker applications are open. If they're there, that's awesome. If not, you could definitely wait until like the time comes. As for other public speaking, I would say first establish like your purpose of becoming a public speaker, and then kind of decide who do you want to speak for. So kind of like your target audience, and then kind of build your personal brand there.
Right.
So basically, like what makes you different, what makes you unique as a speaker, and why should people get you as a public speaker for sure.
Have you ever practiced in front of a mirror?
Oh, even though it was quite awkward, I would say yes, I did practice in front of a mirror.
I don't think I could never. It's so awkward, right? But like, I guess it does help because you get to see what you would look like to the audience, right?
Yeah, and I would say by being discomforted or uncomfortable is kind of actually the area of growth.
Right.
It's definitely a little bit outside your comfort zone, but if you're completely out of it, like if you're too far from it, then definitely that's not okay. Definitely go a little bit back in your comfort zone, but just slowly expand it. Like, it's not expected for you to become like a really great public speaker in one day. Definitely you do have to take a lot of work and a lot of practice, and basically improving your delivery and also like your content of your speech.
What do you think is more important, delivery or content?
Are you making me choose?
Well, I mean, give us a percentage, I think. Like,
Okay.
if you can. Or is there more to us good speech rather than just both content and delivery? Is there something else?
I would say those two are the main ones. There's also a lot of things to take into consideration. I would say if delivery is part of like engagement and connecting with the audience, I would say like 50-50 around. Definitely content's also as important as basically doing a delivery, because ultimately it's kind of like what people want to listen to, what people want to take away from, like definitely the informations and tips that people want.
Okay. And then you mentioned this earlier, but you suggested to look up like other TED speakers, right, and see what they did good and sort of pick out what you think you should do, right? So is that a way that you sort of developed your own personal style of speaking?
I would say some, in a tiny bit, yes.
Right.
I did look at other speakers that, okay, like what did they do that I liked? For example, they were really expressive with the body language. I decided to be more expressive with my body language. And I would say it also comes from my own personality.
Right.
So kind of like what do I want to show up to people as. And basically I wanted to be relatable, kind of be like this person, the go-to person for public speaking. So I kind of wanted to be a little bit more expressive and definitely more relatable in a sense.
So you basically decided, you thought of what you wanted to appear as, and you sort of took what worked for people and sort of made it into a trial and error sort of thing, right?
Yes, and I would say definitely also a role model person.
Right.
So a person like, who do I want to be as a person? So I kind of basically tried to go on that roadmap to suppose end person. Though I would say that suppose end person or the role model person to have does change from time to time.
Yeah.
So I would say it's important to definitely check in regularly to see like, okay, is this a person they still want to be, or do they need to readjust or make some changes? So that's definitely a point to take in mind.
Right. So on that topic, and I know you've talked a lot about this online, especially on LinkedIn. So personal branding, right? What does personal branding mean? Because I know a lot of kids don't really think about the idea of having a personal brand, because most young people don't have like a lot of experiences to list out. So what is personal branding?
Yeah, for sure. I would say it's the same as a business brand. So for example, like Apple or Samsung, you know them, and also as well people too. It applies to people too. For example, like Elon Musk. So like kind of like what the words come to mind, what do like the personality traits come to mind. So for example, when I think of Elon Musk, I think of Tesla. It's immediately connected to him.
Right.
And I would say with personal branding, it also allows you to get to know the person without actually meeting them. I would say it's kind of crazy too. And not only that, but you also stand out as a person, because personal branding is kind of what makes you unique as in a sense, and kind of like what's your mission, what's your vision, what's your values. And it can become really handy for post-secondary applications, especially if you need to stand out and get the application and get the acceptance letter.
Or even job interviews, right?
Yeah, for job interviews too, or whatever you like. I would say for me, definitely in the future, we post-secondary. And that's for me right now. I would say definitely standing out in digital presence, and as well as for public speaking.
Right. So you mentioned this, the idea that personal branding is a way for people to get to know you without actually knowing you, right? Do you think there's a negative side to that as well? Because I'll give some context to this. When you mentioned Elon Musk, right? You think most people, when people say Elon Musk, they think of Tesla, think of SpaceX, right? All these like innovative products, right? But then for some people, we think of Elon Musk as the guy who smoked weed on Joe Rogan's Experience. And he actually, yesterday, I think, or 2 days ago, he tweeted out this. I don't know if you follow up on Twitter, but he tweeted, "It's 69 days after 420 again." And so this idea that personal branding allows you to sort of know the person without actually getting to know them, is there a bad side to that?
I would say yes, in a sense. Some people may be concerned about just privacy, or maybe separating like the professional and from the personal self.
Right.
But I would say like some mitigations or some ways to deal with it is definitely share what you're comfortable with. Like, what is your comfort zone? Definitely don't share your personal information online.
Yes.
Stay safe
don't.
on the internet. But I would say for some people who just don't like Elon Musk, going back to the example you have, Ultimately, you can't please everyone, I would say. There's always going to be someone that doesn't like you. I used to think that I could please everyone. That did not end well. I learned it the hard way, by kind of just feeling dissatisfied in the sense that some people don't like me. And eventually I accepted, like, okay, like, even though, like, some people do like me, some people also don't like me, that's definitely okay with me.
Right. And how would you describe your own personal brand?
Ooh, good question. I would say, like, definitely some words that come to mind is definitely youth leader, someone who's relatable, someone who wants to ultimately want to power youth towards their own success, personal and professional development specifically, for other leadership, mentorship, or public speaking.
Right. And so how did you sort of figure out that this is the brand that you wanted to build?
Yeah, for sure. I would say it's kind of similar to building a brand, for example, like a nonprofit organization. So first of all, you kind of have to discover, like, well, okay, what's my mission? Basically, like, your short-term goals, like, what am I aiming to? Like, the vision is, what do I see myself in 5 to 10 years doing? And kind of the values is, like, what exactly do I value? Like, do I value honesty? Do I value empathy? Kind of thinking of those types of adjectives. I would say, like, 3 is a pretty good number. And then next of all, you kind of decided, like, who do you want to appeal to? Like, who should I network with? For example, that's kind of like your target audience, I would say. And because ultimately, there's so many people out there, and you kind of need to narrow it down to, like, a niche.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, for that personal brand, you decide, okay, like, what am I gonna do? Like, how can I provide value? Because a lot of people always think, like, what's in it for me? Like, what do I get out of it? And for example, for myself, like, I provide public speaking opportunities, and I want to help empower and motivate youth. So that's kind of the value that I'm giving to the community. It's kind of like the tips and experiences that I have. And I would say for personal branding, I would say not only that, but also it's really important to network with others, I would say.
Yep.
Definitely try to get to know others and share their stories. And ultimately, by networking with others, you could definitely have a lot of doors for opportunities opened up for you.
And so, can you tell us a bit about your experience networking? Like, how did you learn how to do that? Like, because it's not something that's really taught in high school, right?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely have to agree with you. Networking, it can be very daunting at times. I would say this from a person who used to be very scared of making a phone call by myself.
Right.
It can be pretty daunting to reach out to a stranger, kind of just cold messaging them. But I would say LinkedIn is kind of the go-to platform. And there's another one called Bumble, Bumblebiz. But I would say LinkedIn is kind of the main well-known platform. So I kind of start off there. Make sure to complete your profile. Like, it's really important to have a very full profile. So you kind of also get that credibility. That's actually part of your personal brand. Basically, you kind of have the online reputation of yourself. So it's really important to make sure that you're credible and not looking shady online.
Right.
There was a one time I actually didn't complete my profile. I actually kind of looked shady. I was like, you know what, I should do something about it. And I would say afterwards, it's actually starting by making a connection. So similar on Instagram or Facebook, like requesting a friend or just following someone. But instead, I would say kind of just make a personal note as to why you want to connect with them. For example, hey, I saw this recent post that you made and I really loved it. I want to get to know you better, and I also want to, like, get to know your story. And I would say a person would definitely feel touched by that message, and they want to connect with you and learn more about them. And I would say definitely, even though you're kind of nervous about it, try to have a call, in a sense. And I would say for networking, it can be a professional relationship, but definitely try to get to know them as a person and not just like their job title or their volunteer title or whatsoever. And I would say also for networking, a not to do is to also just straight up ask for something at once.
Yeah.
Because it kind of feels like they don't feel respected or appreciated.
No, I agree with you. Getting to know the person is definitely more personal, right? Like, when somebody comes, like if a stranger comes up to you on the street and just asks, hey, can I have, your shoes, for example, right? It's kind of awkward, and you have to say no, right? But if they get to know you more and more, and you have actual conversation with them, get to know them as a person, right? It's definitely more easier to build a relationship, right? And so, I mean, were there any, like, sort of challenges that you had to face when you were networking? Like, did people sort of shut you down easily, or was there something that you were doing wrong that you realized later on that, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done this, maybe I should have done that?
Surprisingly, by just being personal, just wanting to get to know most people,
Right.
LinkedIn community is actually definitely very welcoming, actually. And I would say the biggest hurdle I had to go over was definitely making like live Zoom calls. I did want to have like a couple of Zoom calls with them just to get to know them, because I would say texting does kind of have like kind of lack that connotation or kind of the meaning that they're trying to provide.
Yeah.
And I would say it's definitely easier to get an answer.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say by overcoming the hurdle, I would say, okay, it's kind of just getting to know a friend, but for sure some things to look out for. I hadn't discovered this yet, but some people did on LinkedIn. It's definitely important. I know that always online there's always like a little bit of danger, but as long as you take like a safety precautions, you'll be fine. It's just that to not share too much personal information in with someone else that you don't know, unless like you know them actually know them in person, or you know them enough.
And do you think that schools should maybe put more focus on the idea of networking and building relationships in that way?
I would say not only that, but also life skills in general, in the sense of soft skills that can be applied in many different areas that we need. For example, like teamwork. Even though there's team projects, we're not really taught like really how to like have a good teamwork and have a good relationships within teams.
Right.
Or even just time management or learning in a sense.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, do you think that with the current way that schools are teaching these kids, do you think that it's difficult for these like students to actually learn about these skills, or do you think it's easier because there are extracurriculars and clubs that actually provide this way of learning?
It depends how you look at it. Personally, I would say that because I had the drive to, and I was fortunate enough to discover these opportunities. I would say that the school, there's always something missing. It can be better by better supporting their students, but
Right.
some students, there's always a different situation. For example, like sometimes they may not know of the opportunities that are available to them. Sometimes they can't go to the opportunities because they have no time. Sometimes like there may be something going on that they can't volunteer, and I know that the education system also somewhat relies on the parents to kind of teach them life skills,
Right.
but not all parents can teach, which I know that there's definitely kind of that learning gap.
Right. And then for those kids, there's definitely a learning curve, right, for them, where they have to sort of overcome a steeper learning struggle than most kids, right?
Yeah, I definitely have to agree.
Yeah. And I guess in that sense, the way you answered, would you recommend that students who don't get that sort of experience and that lessons in school go out and find opportunities to do so?
I would say definitely take the initiative to learn what you want to learn. For example, if you're kind of struggling with time management organization, I would definitely search up like study YouTube channels and such,
Right.
as well as productivity tips. And I would say by taking initiative, you also learn a lot on your own too. And and I would say for staying motivated, I also struggle to stay motivated at times, especially with finishing a task.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And I would say for motivation, always remember like why do you want to do it, like your mission, like why you're feeling it. And I would say like visualizing like what you'll look like when you're successful, and kind of thinking like, oh, that feels really nice, I want to be at that point.
Right.
So basically it motivates me to push even further towards the finish line.
And I think lastly, I mean, we see students who don't get that, who don't have a lot of experience under the belt, right? Like they don't, maybe they haven't taken the initiative, or there are certain reasons that have stopped them from taking initiative, from gaining more experience. But what advice would you give those students who want to build a personal brand, even though they may not have experience to do so?
I would say the personal brand always depends on the person, but I would say definitely like who you are as a person is kind of their personal brand. We actually already have our personal brands, and it's basically how others perceive us,
Right.
and how we want to be. So basically by kind of just defining that even more, like basically clarifying some details, and basically really starting to get that online on like LinkedIn or on Instagram, and basically reaching out to people and making yourself known. And as for just if you do want to get involved, in your community, you could definitely search for opportunities online. And I would say search within your community too. For example, at schools, you can definitely ask. Like if there's a career counselor, you could reach out to them and ask, like, are there any volunteer opportunities for in STEM or in arts? And I would say if you're too daunted for a leadership position, like an executive director or such, you could always start off as a member of the organization, and then you could definitely slowly build your confidence on the way up. But if you don't have a lot of experience and you do actually want to get into a leadership position, that's actually pretty great. But I would say if you're too daunted by it, I used to be really daunted by it, but I would say talk more about your mindset, because they also take into consideration like your mindset and your willingness to learn and adapt, as well as your experience too. So it's actually a kind of a bigger part in a sense, and as well as basically being like who you are as a person, because being authentic and being like personable
and genuine, right?
Yeah, genuine.
Yeah. I guess well, I also want to end off with this question as well. Like, what would you say to the people who you're right? Like, there are people who feel daunted to actually go out and get experience, right? But what would you say to the people who might feel sort of disencouraged because there are people sort of making fun of them, or people who are judging them because they're trying to do this? Like, have you faced that struggle too?
Yes, I faced that struggle in a sense that I was known as a person who really was a try-hard. I couldn't connect with a lot of people, and I did feel kind of bummed about it. Like, I actually considered to maybe take it easy, but then I remembered the why did I want to do it. So basically, is there something that was holding me back? And I realized that I was just doing it because I like it.
Right.
Like, I liked what I was doing, and eventually, like, even though people tell you to do stuff, like to act in a certain way, to be in a certain way, it's ultimately up to you what do you want to do and who you want to be. I would say you are in control of yourself, I would say. And by that, you also you can get over that hurdle by saying that, okay, like, I know there's people who disapprove of this, but I still want to do it because I want to do it.
And you shouldn't really listen to what people think of you if they really don't have any input in what you were trying to accomplish, right? If they're not providing any good feedback, why would their criticism be be worth listening to, right?
Yeah, and I do want to add on that, like, it's also okay to that doesn't mean that you should not listen to others' feedback, because sometimes their feedback can be good for you. Like, sometimes you don't realize that some of the things that you're doing actually can annoy some people or such. But I would say there's a fine line between like constructive criticism or just being plain rude. So it can be very hard to distinguish that fine line. But through experience and through try and error, you could definitely explore that.
Yeah. And on that note, Vivian, if people want to contact you, what would be the best way to do so?
Oh my goodness, great.
This is your like 15 seconds of shameless promo. Okay,
sounds good. So you can definitely contact me on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn at Vivian XYZ. So basically, I kind of branded myself as that. So feel free to email. You can also email me at vivianxyzt@gmail.com. So that's also where you can reach out to me at.
Perfect. Thank you for your time, Vivian.
All right. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to episode 5 of the Uncooked Rice Show. If you want to share this episode with your friends, we're on both Spotify and iTunes, Apple Podcasts. So please feel free to share with your friends if you enjoyed this episode. And until next time, thanks again.